This meeting of the Big Bear Fire Authority is called to order at 5:06, July 8th, 2025. Calling it together, called to order. Sorry, now I'm all off. Could we please have a moment of silence and Director Walsh will lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Cordell, we have roll call, please.
Of course. Director Herrick?
Here.
Director Hicks?
Aye.
Director Melnick?
Here.
Director Putz?
Here.
Vice Chair B. Rowe?
Here.
Director J. Rowe?
Here.
Director Russo?
Here.
Director Walsh?
Here.
Director Ziegler, I have as absent, and Board Chair Segovia.
Here.
Thank you.
Right, we have no announcements or upcoming events, presentations. Do we have any directors' general announcements? Director Herrick?
I'd just like to announce, many of us already know that tomorrow the Castle Rock parking lot is going to open, which is a great safety feature, getting people hopefully off the road once they get used to having the parking lot there and starting to use it. So beautiful parking lot, has a bathroom, and city's very excited to have it open.
Director Hick?
And just, I think it's happened since our last meeting, but just to remember those Idaho firemen that were ambushed fighting a fire. Here, I guess about three weeks ago. Fortunately, they were able to catch the perpetrator and he will no longer be a problem.
Anybody else? No, all right. General public comment, members of the public who wish to comment on topics not included on the agenda or comment on agendized topics are invited to provide comments. Please note that state law prohibits the authority from taking action on items not listed on the agenda. There's a 3-minute maximum time limit when addressing the board. This time limit may be shortened by the chair to accommodate a large number of speakers. Mr. Gilbranson.
Here. How's everybody doing? As you can see, I just got back from Texas. But what I am glad to see is that we got our signs up for occupancy. I was a little disappointed last month when we had people knowingly that there wasn't any signs up. And so I'm going to be videotaping over at the city hall tomorrow to see if there's occupancy signs over there. I'm hoping so. And I will be going around to all the public meetings or properties to double check on that. Because when I heard people saying, oh yeah, oh, that's out in the open now and people know about it, I was kind of but what the hell? What is this? I don't care for that. I'm trying to where you follow the law, whether it like pulling teeth or not. So thank you, Chief, on that, because you were there at the last meeting, and I'm assuming you took care of it over there too. But we'll find out. Mayor, I want to talk to you. You need to apologize to me. And I'm waiting for your apology. You are not judge and jury. You misunderstood, you were triggered, and I don't appreciate that. So I expect an apology before tomorrow's meeting. You wouldn't talk to me, so I'm talking to you. Also, like I said, I just got back from Texas. It was very trying. 30 little children drowned, little girls. sisters had a death grip going down the river and were held together for miles. We dug them out of the mud. And they were still in a death grip with each other. It was one of those things, 1 in 100 years, but it's the Guadalupe is a river that is a flash flood alley. They knew it. It hadn't happened for a long time. Oh, what, 100 years ago? You know, I'm sure they lost a bunch of good-sized cows. This was very traumatic for me down there, being next to it, close again. A disaster. And you know what? It wasn't because of climate change.
Dan, your time is up.
It wasn't because of Trump. It was because of not doing the right thing. And that includes the fires here in Big Bear that could happen.
Does it make a sound?
It's not making a sound because it would mess with the recording. All right, chief's report, moving on.
Thank you. Excited to notify the board that as of this last month, a big project that the department has been working on for a number of years is trying to coordinate and get coordinated together an active shooter program, mass casualty incident program. This last month, Battalion Chief Fonda, with the assistance of Captain Andrew Crane, Engineer Bill Walters, and Engineer Corey Emerson, was able to coordinate their efforts along with San Diego County Fire, San Diego County Sheriff's Department, Big Bear Airport, and the hospital district, along with Bear Valley Unified School Districts. And organized training that was hosted at the Paradise Training Yard. This week's classrooms level training. And on the 22nd and 23rd of this month, they'll be conducting live scenarios at Big Bear High School. If anybody'd like to attend, please come on out, take a look at what our folks are doing. Again, a big deal. This has been something that we've worked on for a number of years. It's been a challenge for us just based on numbers of resources that we have. Same with law enforcement, the number of deputies that they have on per day. It's hard to organize this kind of training without any kind of big budgetary impacts based on overtime. We're able to handle that on shift now at the shift level and get this training done. Just make us better prepared for any possible emergencies that could be coming down the road. That's it.
Any questions from any of the directors? Okay, moving on to finance officers report.
For the month of May, we were at 92% for the year. And our revenues were at 97% as we have received our second round of property taxes in April. And the expenses were over budget, again, 2% due to the reimbursable mutual aid expenses. But other than that, we're tying very close to budget as of May. Are there any questions?
No questions? Kristen? Okay. Moving on to consent calendar. Does anybody want to pull an item off the consent calendar?
I don't want to pull, I just have some questions
Okay,
on the demands, payments that were made. And I don't want to go line by line, I just have some sort of high level questions. Do we have a per diem policy when it comes to transfer meal reimbursement? I'm seeing that we have for some 5 meals a day, others 3 meals a day, up to $100. And so I'm wondering if we have a per diem policy or how that's determined.
We do per person, it's 15 for breakfast, 20 for lunch and 30 for dinner.
Oh, wow, it's more than the city. So if there's somebody who has $100 or $60,
It's
so are we
likely-
presuming that they're gone all day?
Perhaps they had paid for a meal for a partner that was with them and is reimbursed for their meal as well.
Do we have a way of checking for that in accounting?
Absolutely, we have the detail of every single receipt for all of those.
For Amazon Capital Services, there's a fiscal year, is that Amazon or is that something different?
We do have an Amazon business account.
So I was just wondering what the $3,400 charge, HSSGP.
I'd have to get back to, but I think that was related to a capital purchase, but I don't remember offhand, but I'll let you know.
Thank you. And then for a corporate credit card, we have $1,000 in bulletproof vests. I was just wondering about that. Is that for what you were talking about?
That's correct. So as part of the active shooter program, I'll give you some details if you'd like those, Director. In order for our personnel to actually go and respond into what's considered a warm area, not potentially completely out of harm's way, we create rescue task forces. And those go in with armed law enforcement members, and those are protection for our personnel.
I figured as such, I just wanted to ask, it's one of those, after Chuck's comments and you realize that the world we live in, it's a sad state of affairs that we have
Agreed.
firefighters that are wearing bulletproof vests
Agreed.
to do their jobs. And then just one other one, there's a $4,590 charge for hotel rental, cars and meals on the credit card. What is that?
That was most likely for a mutual aid reimbursable trip for a fire.
Could you, because there's a separate charge for mutual aid,
Who is?
mutual aid travel here. So if you could just get back to me on that.
Yeah, sure, sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Right, and Luke, just one question, so has all of our personnel then been outfitted with bulletproof vests?
No, so previously, prior to this, we had received grant funding that purchased vests. And helmets as well. Those vests had since the plates actually had expired. And so there was not grant funding available at the time for us to do the replacement. So what we had done was directed the battalion chief to make a purchase of, I believe it's either 3 or 4 vests of mixed sizes, and those will get passed between the on-duty battalion chiefs from day to day. So we only have the limited stock that we have to obviously avoid the cost and outfit our personnel as needed.
Is that something we could piggyback off the sheriff's department and what, how they purchase those kinds of things? I just wonder if there's.
Yeah, I would think so, but concern, chief, is that I know when we're outfitted for vests, because you know, I'm a deputy sheriff. When we're outfitted for vests, it's an individual
Yeah.
fitting, it's not a general fitting. So, and it may be more expensive. But I think you need to look at that as opposed to just buying generic, one size fits all, you know, 3 different sizes. I would talk to the captain about that because that's critical on making sure that the vests function and the level of vest that you buy. Cause I know our vests now, we have a ceramic plate carrier plate that we wear. And the kind of shooting that you guys probably get involved in will probably involve a high caliber rifle.
Yes, these are plate carriers, and the vests are designed to be adjusted. They're not specific to a one size fits all, and that's what we were looking for in this. So I mean, we utilized the vendor to help us get something that would best meet our needs.
Okay. Yeah, and again, maybe at some point in the future, I would just look to make sure you have a vest for everybody.
Yeah, I know on LAFD, they all had their own personally fit up, which obviously.
Yeah.
Big expense.
Yeah, that would be an expense I think would be worth it when we get to that point.
Loud and clear, understood.
And with that, I'll make a motion on consent.
Okay, second, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Chardell, roll call, please.
Director Herrick,
Aye.
Director Hicks,
Aye.
Director Melnick,
Aye.
Director Putz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Biro,
Aye.
Director J Rowe,
Aye.
Director Russo,
Aye.
Director Walsh,
Aye.
Board Chair Segovia.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, moving on to new business. FA4. Board meetings held at authority headquarters. Board consideration to discuss and provide further direction to staff.
At the June 10th regular board meeting, discussion was held regarding the potential to move the authority board meetings to Oakford Hall to allow for live streaming. Allow for an increase in attendance based on capacity. Also discussion regarding the availability of audio video recordings. That could be posted to a website. And then our current retention policy, which is currently 90 days. So we had done some looking into that. So Gladwell Government Services, they assisted the fire authority previous to my tenure. And had come up at the time, along with the assistance of staff, with the 90-day retention policy.
in reaching back out to them, we find that they say that most agencies that they deal with are somewhere between 2 and 4 years. But again, that'll be up for discussion. For live streaming, we actually are currently doing that. So as of the ad hoc strategic planning committee meeting, we did the trial run for that. The device that's here on the table in front of us is recording the room. Dwayne was able to create a Big Bear Fire Authority YouTube page. That strategic planning meeting is posted there now. He also has on the Big Bear Fire Authority webpage the link that can take you to live streaming on our YouTube page, as well as you can look at the additional videos. Expansion on capacity. We have currently set up in the apparatus bay a TV that is available in case we did go outside the occupancy of 30. Again, if we were to have that situation, we'd leave it at 29 in here to allow people from the overflow area to come inside, make their public comment, go back out, continue to watch the video. That's all been taken care of. In response to what the cost was for that, there has been very minimal costs, which is just simply the purchase of this owl that Dwayne was able to pick up for us under $300. Other than that, he's here attending our meetings for all our AV needs as well. And so at that point, beyond this, there's no additional cost to that. At this point, staff recommends the authority board to discuss further and provide direction to staff regarding retention time cycles. And you can take a look at this process after the meeting and see if you approve of the quality of the recordings.
Thank you. I mean, I was actually excited that we did record that last ad hoc meeting. I think that's great news, good step in the right direction. So I guess we should discuss the retention policy.
And
So-
could I just-
Oh,
my
all right.
apologies, I'll just note procedurally, I went back and looked at the resolution adopting the retention schedule. And it can be updated by the fire chief with review and approval by the department head and general counsel as well. So the board can discuss it and provide direction, but in terms of formally changing it, that can be done at staff level.
Great.
But direction is appreciated.
But the other question would be, on the establishment of the video links and all that. I'm assuming we do not have any policy in place that speaks to how we manage that and the kind of access. I'm not sure if that's something that's needed or we could just go the way we are, which I'd be surprised.
I would say most agencies don't have a formal policy on that. A lot of agencies coming out of the COVID period, transitioned to something where they did either continued live broadcasting or hybrid meetings for the public to comment and all those things. Most agencies just did that by providing direction to staff on how they wanted to see meetings to go forward. So essentially staff would start to live, if that's the direction for the board, staff would start to live broadcast the meetings and storing them somewhere in addition to retaining them.
Cause I know on the airport board, we went to recordings and video. And the premise was because of COVID. So we had some document in place that says, okay, we're gonna do this because of COVID and the emergencies and all that. And clearly the emergency's over, but I don't think I've seen anything that terminated issue on using videos.
A lot of agencies continued on essentially. When meetings could go back to being in person, some agencies decided no more broadcasting or teleconferencing or anything like that. Some kind of continued to do the video broadcasting and teleconferencing. So it's sort of a mixed bag. I would say most agencies now, at least that are decent sized agencies, have some form of either public broadcasting or hybrid meetings for the public.
Just a point of order, do we need our mics on to be picked up? On the broadcast, so it's in here, all of us.
The mics are just for sleep our out.
I have a question. How long does YouTube keep the videos up?
Forever as far as I know.
Okay. Because I just want people to be able to access them sort of an indefinite period of time without the need to do a public records request. Do we need, if they're gonna be stored on YouTube sort of indefinitely, I guess then we'd be beholden to their policies if it changes. I mean, I would say that we do a record retention of 4 years. I mean, I'd like to be able to go back and have the history. I think it's hurt us not having the ability on fire to be able to go back and see what actually happened during a meeting and what was said. And so I would say that we should do 4 years.
I agree with that. Randy, do you have something?
I'm curious about the quality of the camera. I don't know if it's dirty or out of focus or something, but my hope is that we can improve that somehow.
We can improve it.
Okay. And then is the camera and the folks manning that, is that for out there? Or out,
That's fire protection.
That's fire protection district, remember?
okay, thank you. So then there's a monitor out there right now
Yes.
streaming that's based on that, those visuals up there?
Yes.
Oh, yes, that, thank you.
All right, so. I'll lean on you, Nick. Do we don't, if the chief, if staff can update that, but if we just get direction 4 years, is that?
That's fine, and I'm assuming the board consensus, you can either do this by a formal motion or.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
so we do need a motion.
Yeah,
Okay.
or just consensus and no
Okay.
objection to live broadcasting and then updating the record retention schedule.
So just to define a little bit more, the 4 years is for all our records. And the only reason I'm questioning that is I think our minutes should be retained.
It is just for meeting either video or audio recordings. That's the only category that's.
So
Minutes
we're gonna
are-
request that you take those down from YouTube. We'll just let them run.
No, I would let them run. I think it's our formal video retention policy is 4 years. My concern is that YouTube could change their policy to 2 years, 6 months, and I don't want to be beholden to, I don't think we should be beholden to that. So it would be that we have a policy that says that we are going to retain any audio, video recording for no less than 4 years. If YouTube does it for longer, then that's great.
And if YouTube goes out of business day after tomorrow, then
We still have-
a policy to retain.
So maybe just as part of the motion, just so it's clear for future boards that the YouTube videos will stay until taken down by YouTube.
Yes,
So we don't have any misunderstanding that somebody decides to take them down
Well,
years from now.
well, maybe something simpler would just be that we have a 4-year audio and video retention policy. And the methodology that we use to store it, we can leave at the discretion of the chief.
but I don't want us to have to take them down from YouTube. So if YouTube keeps them on in perpetuity, then I'd like them to stay.
No,
Right.
I understand.
I know, that's why I'd like to have it spelled out in the motion, so it's clear, not for us, we understand. Well, in future boards, so it's clear to them where they could say, well, the policy is, so take them all down. Just leave them at YouTube as long as they're willing to store them, why not?
Right.
I don't disagree with that, but my concern is if we say our formal retention policy is 4 years, but we're gonna leave them on YouTube indefinitely, our practice is not consistent with our policy.
Right.
And then we set a precedent that, well, yeah, you said 4 years, but you ignored that, you've left them up indefinitely. 10 years later, it's like, no, you should be doing that because that's what you did. So my concern is that that sets a precedent, puts us in a difficult position. So I would recommend we just pick whatever the number is, if we want it to be 10 years or 5 years or whatever, and then we do it. Whatever the retention policy is.
So your suggestion is to take them down from YouTube at the end of.
My suggestion is we set a retention policy and we follow it. So. Whatever that number is, we don't set it and then ignore it.
Or is it more just the case of us just saying that we have a 4-year retention policy, period? And, I mean, we could put it up on YouTube, but there's nothing that says that YouTube won't keep it up forever, or John Joe puts it up on his YouTube and keeps it up forever. I think it's the critical, and I have to agree with Randy on, I think the critical part is that we will ensure to the public that we will keep audio and video for 4 years, period. Now, where it resides after 4 years, we have no control over. And I think if we start saying YouTube, then we may get ourselves into problems there, because there may be other places to store stuff. On X, on True Social. So let's just get out of that business and just say 4 years, period. Anything after that, we have no control.
Right, because we don't control YouTube.
No, but we control if we keep it
How
on.
do you take it down though? That's the
You
problem.
can take it down. So Mike, it's
Post
just like,
says you
it's
take
like
it down.
trespassing issues. If you allow someone, if you say no trespassing or whatever, and allow people to trespass, right, it can set a precedent and then you can be held responsible. I mean, lawyers know better than I do this stuff, that even though you have a rule, if you don't follow it, and same thing's true with copyright. If you don't enforce your copyright or your trademark laws, then people make a case that, yeah, well, you never did anything about it, you ignored it, so your practice is what becomes.
So at the city, we have a retention policy. But we keep things up on video and whatnot in perpetuity. I think what is stored on like my pictures on Shutterfly or what you post on Facebook is different than our formal, what we retain record. But we're not using YouTube as our record retention format. We're keeping those somewhere else that we control.
Okay, so then the publishing on YouTube really isn't material to our record retention policy, because technically our record retention policy is we internally have those records, anybody can request them up to 4 years or whatever the number is, and we are responsible to provide them. And then that's that.
I would just say procedurally, most agencies set a record retention policy. And then the question of how exactly they're presented to the public is essentially handled at the staff level. I think you're not probably gonna find many agencies that where the board set a policy of how long and exactly in what way the records are accessible on the website. Most of that is typically driven by, in my experience, IT constraints, whether that's file sizes or the website capabilities and those types of things. So generally it is dealt with simply by the record retention policy.
So then maybe this helps. I'll make a motion consistent with what Chuck said, that we have, and consistent with what Perry said, that we have a record retention policy of 4 years and trust staff to implement however that's handled. We don't get into the specifics of it's gonna be on YouTube forever or whatever. Just leave it at that. That would be my motion.
And as long as we have copies of it, then they can always come and get it when we're ready. Up to 4 years. Have a nice day.
I briefly saw Larry's hand waving.
Chief. If YouTube were to wipe them out at 2.5 years, is this saying that Dwayne will have to archive this stuff somehow in some media for 4 years?
Yes,
That's the one.
for sure. Cause YouTube could go out of business tomorrow.
And just clarifying that that's,
I don't think it will, but
We would find another way to live stream, and we'll have a way to maintain copies of those videos for records request purposes.
do we have any idea of the cost to do that?
No, not right off the top of my head. I can find out, let you know.
So there's a second on it. Let me just add one little thing to give me a level of
I don't
confidence.
think I got a second.
You did not, so I said.
I'll second.
or, Did not do your best. Okay. Then I'll now have to make a substitute.
Thank you. Anytime.
Unless you want to change yours. If the language was for the records of which we retain, I'd be fine with that. I just don't want an excuse that somebody internally decides to go to YouTube and erase everything. Now, whatever that period of time is. That should be there. If they're willing to store it, leave it there for perpetuity. But don't give an excuse or open the door for somebody here, for whatever reason, who would like to get rid of that. I'm not saying anybody here would do that, but again, we're not to be sitting at these desks forever. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So do you want to reword?
Not, sorry.
I would just add to it that for all video and audio records held and retained by the fire authority, leave it at that. Everything else on the outside. There is no trigger to get rid of them. There shouldn't be a trigger to get rid of it.
I think that's certainly what I intended.
That's
not what I
said.
said.
There were some words, I couldn't vote yes. What's your motion, please?
Okay, so
As word.
So Rick's motion, do we have a second?
Well, I don't know that Rick made a motion.
Well, I was hoping just to,
Just make a substitute motion.
okay, the substitute motion is, and. I was thinking through my motion when you were talking about it, so you're suggesting 4 years on.
That's 4 years.
Harry said.
Retention policy as an agency, the records that we retain, we have to retain audio, video recordings for 4 years.
Okay, so now it's clear. It wasn't clear previously. It was very
Okay.
muddy previously, so I'm
So that's,
okay.
I guess, a substitute motion.
Okay.
Well, I think that's what she said.
It-
Never
If they're the same thing, he's just feeling more,
So I'm gonna rescind my previous motion and make my current motion what Harry just said.
Okay.
Is that, okay?
And we have a second.
second, we already had a second.
Are you okay with that second?
I'm okay with
What's the
that.
second motion?
And now that it's recorded, people can be very clear on what the language is.
Okay,
Okay.
Chardell, roll call, please.
Can you please confirm the first and second for that?
Randy and Chuck.
Thank you.
Oh, it was your motion, substitute motion that I.
No, it was not. It was Randy
I
took on
I
it.
said what she said.
It's a clarification. She just clarified it. What?
So I made the motion using Harry's words.
So you're gonna have to. And
So
then
it's
Cheryl
Mary's
to let
words.
us know what it is to make sure that we're on track.
I will do my best.
Okay.
Okay, so I have Director Walsh.
Well, what's the motion? Can you repeat the
Oh.
motion?
Yes,
Play it
regarding
back.
the video and audio records retention, records of which the department retains will be 4 years with staff handling the implementation. I'll obviously make that better, but those are my quick notes.
You can just watch the recording back and
Yep.
use verbatim.
Yes.
Yeah, because we had it recorded.
And just to clarify, this is also just audio and video of meetings.
Yes,
I just want to clarify that for the record. Thank you.
Okay, roll call.
Of course, Director Walsh,
Aye.
Director Herrick,
Aye.
Director Hicks,
Aye.
Director Melnick,
aye.
Director Putz,
Aye.
Vice Chair B Rowe,
Aye.
Director J Rowe,
Aye.
Director Russo,
Aye.
Board Chair Segovia.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, FA5, Ad hoc Strategic Planning Committee update. Possible additional revenue. Board consideration to discuss and provide further direction to staff. Chief Wagner.
At the June 30th strategic planning meeting, prior to that, what was requested was to bring forward a new cost allocation analysis. As a reminder, prior to that, kind of what the largest desire to be implemented in the department down the road was gonna be, I believe it was an additional ambulance, a squad, and an engine at a cost of, I believe it's around $5.4 million. What that was going to do is basically place a $7.50 per square foot tax on residential structures. Along with, I think, fairly similar numbers when it came to hotel motel rooms and apartments. So we were requested to come back on the 30th with some changes to that. One of the questions being, can we basically kind of separate or change the rate per square foot depending upon the size of the structure? Given that the larger the structure, the increase in risk for suppression personnel. The answer to that was yes. We had also gotten asked to add in a fourth column. So if you look at the very top line where it says part 1, additional annual costs for property over 1,000 square foot for building. We look at scenarios 1 through 4. Those scenarios basically create what we come to call the menu on what we'd be looking to increase in staffing for the fire department. So on the smallest end, we'd look to increase or add in an additional non-safety ambulance at a cost of $780,041 per year. That ambulance would be a total of 6 personnel, 2 per shift, 1 being an ambulance operator paramedic, 1 being an ambulance operator EMT. And we'd also add in 3 top step firefighters. That would be 1 per shift, with that additional person going to one of our suppression units, either the tower or one of the engines. Total cost for that being 1.3 million, just over. If you go just below that, the assumptions made at the time of build out. And it's hard to exactly put a finger on exactly what is going to be built over the next 25 years. Because this whole list is based on projections to 2060. Would be estimated 1,769 single family dwellings greater than 1,000 square feet. Estimated annual assessed value for those units being $815 million. The estimated property taxes that we would collect on those, $1.2 million. Again, if you go back to the total cost of an ambulance and 3 top step firefighters being 1.3 million. 1.2 in collected taxes, we'd have the need to generate revenue of approximately $92,000 in order to meet that. So if you go down into part 4, so you have to flip the page over. You'll look at the potential tax rates that will come with that. So if you look at single family dwellings greater than 1,000 square feet, you're at 6 cents a square foot. Below that, you'll see the next 5 lines, and those give the breakdown with the increased cost based on potential structure sizes being built. So we go from 1,100 to $1,400 or 1,400 square feet to 2,000, 3,000, and then 4,000. And those dollar amounts based on those single family dwellings on their size go from $6 to $187
Per year.
per year. That's correct. But again, that would be one of the smallest cost to increase in personnel. Again, an ambulance, that'd be per shift, and 1 firefighter per shift. You go to scenario 2, we'd look at adding a paramedic squad. That would also be 6 personnel total, 2 per shift. Both firefighter paramedics, a cost of $1.3 million. I also didn't mention, there's also administrative expenses, approximately $30,000 built in. Again, a need of just over $1.3 million. Based on the build out potential estimated value of those residences, the tax dollars we will collect. We'd be looking to try and generate an extra $107,000 in order to accommodate these changes in staffing. Again, going back to the back page for the scenarios, you're looking at 9 cents per square foot on residential. $9. No, I take that back. Be 9 cents per square foot, 0.093. That'd be $9 for an 1,100 square foot house. Up to $278 per year for a 4,000 square foot house.
Luke, can I just step back for a sec, because I think it would be helpful to talk a little bit about the background of how we got here. This is related to a CFD.
Yes.
Which is for new development in the valley. This would be an additional amount that new development would have to pay as we expand. And this came to the board, I think, 2 years ago, and we summarily rejected it because the annual amount of the tax increase was so exorbitant that nobody would agree to it. Nobody would agree to have it levied on them, and it would in essence sort of kill development. And so through the ad hoc strategic planning committee that's been ongoing for 1.5 years, 2 years, 3 years, depending on how, been looking at different revenue sources to try to generate revenue from not the current residents of the community, but new people and new developments that come. We've explored ad nauseum all different options for that because of what the city can do versus CSD doesn't really gel together. The CFD is the one sort of standing option that we have as the valley develops to when you were getting potentially 100+ room hotels, they're not paying their fair share of the added burden of fire suppression in those developments. So that's what we're bringing back based off of the strategic ad hoc committee is 4 different scenarios. If we wanted to, the whole board explore a CFD. Luke's walking through, I just thought it was helpful to sort of give a little bit of the background. 4 different scenarios based off of what the cost would be for a paramedic, ambulance, these different 4 scenarios and what that dollar amount would be for us to have a robust discussion out of the strategic ad hoc committee, because we're sort of running out of options of ways to pay for additions to the fire department for increased development in the valley, which we know is coming.
Yes, thank you, Director Melvin, for that. I apologize for not providing that information up front, but I think most of you have had that, but sorry, Director Hicks. Ms. Rowe, apologies. Chief, good.
Clarify something, I'm legal clarification on these different scenarios. For example, I see scenario 1 where you talk about ambulance expenses of $780,000. Is that the purchase of an ambulance? Is that the staff the ambulance? And then when I look at scenario 2, there's no ambulance expenses, but then there's $1.3 million for one safety paramedic ambulance squad. So I'm kind of confused on what those are. If you can clarify that for me, please.
So those would be for the personnel, Director Hicks. Correct, Kristen?
If you turn the page, it actually outlines what's included in each of those menu items to help you out. So for the ambulance, it includes staff, some replacement expenses and overhead expenses. For the cost of the 3 firefighters, which is in one of the later scenarios, it's just the cost of staff. And for a paramedic ambulance squad, it includes staff and again, just replacement costs for the apparatus and overhead. So it's all detailed out in the following page for you.
And the differences in the safety paramedic, either ambulance or squad, is that those are safety personnel, so they'd be firefighters as well. As opposed to the non-safety personnel, EMS only, ambulance operator, paramedic, ambulance operator, EMT.
So scenario 3 is what?
Scenario 3 would be a non-safety ambulance. So ambulance operators only, they do not fight fire.
Okay,
That would be a paramedic squad staffed with firefighters. That'd be scenario 3. And then scenario 4 would be the non-safety ambulance. The firefighter paramedic squad, safety personnel, and then 3 additional top step firefighters.
Is there something somewhere that explains what the scenarios are? I missed it.
So this lays out the positions that we'd be looking to fill on the very top, so.
No, but you have 4 columns of each scenario. How do I know what the scenarios are?
Page 3.
Page 3?
This page really.
So the red,
Yeah, so. There's 4 scenarios and there's 3 things listed here. So how do we reconcile that?
so
I
we're
mean,
only looking at,
Never mind that they're not labeled, but how do these correlate to the 4 columns of the scenarios?
so number 1, labeled for the ambulance here, lays out ambulance operator paramedics, 3 per shift and their expenses. The ambulance operator EMTs. Listed
Yeah.
just to the right of that.
I understand the detail, what it is. I don't understand what this. Is scenario number 1, when we have these columns here, is that this first red chunk?
I think Director puts there basically different scenarios of which costs are being attempted to be recovered. So the first one is to recover the ambulance expense costs and then 3 top step firefighters. Scenario 2 does not attempt to recover all those things. It's only the safety paramedic ambulance squad. Scenario 3 is
Both.
both, but not the 3 top step firefighters. And then scenario 4 is everything all combined, that if you're gonna maximize cost recovery, that's scenario 4.
Okay, then can you explain to me when we have part 1, revenue costs for property larger than 1,000 feet? What dictates? I'm not seeing how building size relates to the different scenarios.
The way we broke down the differences in building size as far as costs, and this would be on page 2. It again goes to, can we make a different charge or basically isolate out the smaller structures versus the large? The smaller structure provides a different level of risk, a lower level of risk for our personnel than a larger structure, based on NFPA 1710 and their risk analysis that recommend, don't demand, that for a 2,000 square foot home, can be 2 stories or single story, with no basement and no exposure structures, that optimally, you'd have 16 to 17 responders show up for that. What we're trying to do with these scenarios is basically find middle ground that this body would feel would be tolerable to the community for new development, to not stop that new development, the desire to build in this valley, whether it's residential or commercial. Because we also address hotels, motels, apartment complexes in here. To come up with ways that basically help us add personnel, which enhances our abilities to respond to the community, increases safety for our suppression personnel. Again, while being tolerable to developers.
I wonder if this would be a good time to bring Nehal on, of DTA, who prepared this for you. He would have more detailed answers to your questions.
And Randy, when we looked at it last time, a couple of years ago, what we did is we only did it for properties over 3,000 square feet. And the annual dollar cost for that was quite large based off of the menu of items that we wanted. What we realized is that we did it for only houses over 3,000 square feet. People would start building houses at 2,900 square feet to avoid being put into the CFD. And so what we wanted to do was come up with scenarios that made the dollar hit, I don't want to call it a dollar hit, the cost for paying for the fire suppression that you get in our community not to be so high that it would stifle development. But that was a number that would start to pay for additional services that the valley very much needs over the course of the period of time as new development or expansion is happening. So we were trying to come up with different scenarios that would make it palatable and not an overwhelming feeling that people understanding are feeling overly taxed. But the fact is, when you build houses and build more and more houses or commercial properties in a community, they are a greater burden on the resources that we have, and somebody has to.
So, I don't have the benefit of being in the ad hoc committee so I apologize.
No,
I appreciate your patience with me. But my understanding of a CFD was that it's a tax that's assessed on new development to offset the additional burden that that new development places on our public safety infrastructure, on our fire rescue infrastructure. Correct?
Correct.
Oh, and so that whatever number you may settle on and might get approved, that is a function of people doing new building to generate that additional money.
Correct.
Am I clear so far? Okay. So when we get to staffing levels, I start getting a little confused because we have maybe we have some idea of how many 2,500 square foot single family homes are going to be built in a given time, how many giant hotels are going to be built, or whatever the case may be. We don't know how that will play out. And I read the footnotes, and I guess there's some estimates in there as to, based on previous stuff, we expect that this much will be built. But is this an effort to reconcile that if based on past development, we assessed these different, I guess, different rates, because the scenarios are staffing, which is independent of the rates.
It's what are we comfortable having as a CFD amount? And this is what you would get at that tax.
Right.
No other, that
this-
taxing,
Is the CFD an ongoing annual fee?
yes.
Okay, so it's not like when you go to the school district and you're building a new house and you pay impact fees and it's a one-time thing. So this is an ongoing, so that means then, if I'm following that, if this were to pass and you build a house here after that date or a hotel or whatever it is, you're going to be paying a higher percentage on top of the taxes that you already pay. Compared to what people who built before that.
Correct.
Okay, so there's a whole philosophical discussion about if that's fair and just, but we'll save that for another day. So then if I'm following, and again, I appreciate your patience as I try and understand this, you're trying to equate service levels with anticipated development
As,
to arrive at a fee that would cover the anticipated cost. Am I getting that right?
I think the ideal scenario is scenario number 4 in the strategic planning meeting with the union folks. This was a scenario that would be comfortable for future build out, so that's the goal. But we also realized that it might not be tolerable for homeowners and the prices. So we were asked to do scenarios that included fewer items. And so that's what you're looking at. It is 4 different options for different service levels, with scenario number 4 being ideal, but most likely not palatable to new
Okay.
homeowners stifling development.
But the end result is that we would be asking new construction to pay for increased service. For all of us,
yeah. Yes.
right?
what-
Because
what
this
the
would be an
argument is
increase
that
in service. right?
Construction puts a greater burden on the resources that we have.
Right, but are we asking them to pay for comparable service? To
Like,
what
are
we
they gonna
have
get,
now
like,
or
concierge care?
increase ours? Well, you provided 4 different levels of service. That's what I'm trying to understand why we are having that. So
I would
still,
I would suggest it being as levels of cost recovery, not necessarily levels of service, levels of cost recovery.
okay,
Or your comfort level.
and you're equating that to service levels as an example.
Yes, there's a connection to like the marginal burden that new development places on the need for fire service. It doesn't mean that when X number of square feet is built, a new employee is hired. But
Okay.
it's a way of assessing and studying and estimating the impact.
What service level? What scenario right now is consistent with the service level we provide?
Scenario 0.
Hmm?
Scenario 0. These are all additional staffing.
So then we are, if we were to pass this, we would be asking new construction to fund additional service.
Or would we be asking them to fund the service to meet their needs? Because if Snow Summit puts in that 150 room hotel like they're thinking about doing, do we have the personnel and the equipment per national standard to fight a major fire in that hotel? And the answer to that, from everything I've heard, is no. Right, so we're gonna need to have some funds from them, not picking on Snow Summit, to help us be able to fight that fire for them that we currently can't fight. So we would have to increase our staffing, increase the number of engines that we would need to be able to meet that demand. And right now, we can't meet that demand. And if they put another 1,000 houses in the valley someplace, interest rates ever go down, we definitely wouldn't be able to meet that demand as we sit right now.
Just before that gets out, we've actually studied how many homes can be built here, and it's not 1,000.
Okay, well, just,
So
okay, whatever the
it's
number.
actually, it's fractional, just to try to understand this a little bit better as well. If I take the figures, and I think for the city, we added 20 homes, something like that. I mean, the numbers aren't very large, so makes my calculations pretty small. $50,000 to $100,000 extra revenue per year, at least starting the first year. You know, it would grow. But the second part of my biggest question, so I'm not understanding the whole thing, is that I initially understood this as a one-time fee that you pay sort of like a developer's fee, is how it was initially explained to me, I think Randy as well, that's how we heard it, not an annual fee that goes on. So I think board members, we need to just understand a little bit better. Right now, the numbers don't seem big enough. There's no way to do any of the scenarios from the numbers I roughly come up with.
So available for us online is Nahal Thumar. He's with DTA, he's the vice president, and he's also available to answer any of those questions for you as well. So feel free to reach out. Nahal, are you
Yep.
able to hear us?
Yes. Hi there. Yes, thank you. I am here. Yep. Any questions related to the methodology of how we calculate the CFD tax? And then also some of the formation procedures. We have Rich Wall, which is a legal counsel, should also be able to answer some of the questions related to the formation process of the CFD.
So I could jump in. So the questions I have, first off, how it was explained to us years ago is it was a one-time fee as opposed to an annual fee. So is the envision that is a one-time substantial fee, then an annual fee, or is it just an annual fee?
This is an annual fee. This is not a one-time development impact fee. This is an annual tax that will be placed on the county property tax bills each year to the homeowners or property owners. It's technically it's called a special tax. It's not an impact fee.
Okay, so then how do you do that? Do you form a special district? I'm kind of losing.
Yes, this is a formation that would have to occur for the Melrose district. So a boundary would be established identifying all of the properties within your area, and then any properties that are a part of that boundary would then be subject to the tax. Part of the procedure, there is requiring a 2/3 vote to form the district. So there would be that vote or threshold that you would need to consider to form this district.
So would the voters then be the empty lot owners?
My understanding is this is an annexation CFD. So I think I'll let Rich weigh in terms of how a future annexation area, that vote procedure would work.
Sure. Thank you, Nahal, and good evening, Chairman and directors. So the idea here is that the district would form what's called a community facilities district under government code. And then what happened, and that would be whatever project starts first. So whatever property owner comes to the authority first after you decided to form the CFD, they would be your flagship project. So you would form this CFD around that property. They'd be subject to the special tax for their development based on the rates and methods set in the CFD. As more development comes to the authority for approval, you would condition them to provide for some funding mechanism and offer the CFD. And then they would annex into that CFD if they elected to. So you would keep adding to the CFD as property keeps getting added within the authority's boundaries. And then as that happens, you'll accumulate more special tax and be able to start to fund these services. The idea here is that this special tax is going to be used to fund the services on an ongoing basis. So your operations, your staffing, things of that nature. I just want to kind of touch briefly because I know it was mentioned before about a one-time fee for the developers. And so the authority has a variety of different mechanisms that it can issue taxes and fees and charges. One is that is not accessible to the authority because you don't have the land use authority is a development impact fee, I think is what you were alluding to. That's a one-time fee of development that is charged for facilities. So think your fire stations, purchase of land, fire trucks, equipment. That's one time and it's done. You don't get any more of that. So that's different than what we're talking about here. This is just more for the ongoing cost to pay for your staffing and equipment moving forward. So with that, I'm happy to answer any of the questions I might have brought up here.
So are you saying that there's an opt-out provision for people coming into the CFD?
I wouldn't think I wouldn't couch it as an opt-out provision. So just by way of background, you can't force a property owner to tax themselves. You have to give them an option. So as a condition of approval, what agencies commonly do, and this is done throughout California, is they say to approve your project, you have to provide some sort of mechanism to pay for the increased service costs and demand that your project's going to cost. Nobody wants to do that. No developer wants to come up with that themselves. So as a public agency, you offer the CFD and they elect, yes, I'll just go ahead and annex my property into the CFD. That meets my condition of approval. but we're not forcing them in a way to get into the CFD. It's a condition of approval, and this allows them to meet that requirement. There are agencies that set up a method that you could go up and basically establish an annuity where like the property owner, the developer in this case, would have to put up a certain amount of funding. He doesn't want to pay for that. He wants the property that the owner who he sells to be burdened with that. So it's just common that developers accept, yep, absolutely, CFD, here we go. And that's how this is progressed throughout.
Richard, is that requirement in place right now as we speak without a CFD? In other words, assume the fire department has to approve plans for new development. Is there an option right now for us to say to new development, hey, you have to pay whatever the impact is? Is that an option now, or do you have to have a CFD in place in order to do that?
I'm not aware of what conditions or approval are in place now, but we would establish that as part of forming the CFD. So we would work with the city and as they go through their authority and their approval of processes, we would work with them to ensure that they include the authority's CFD as a condition of approval.
But I guess what I'm asking hypothetically is, if we use the resorts as an example, do we have the authority as we sit right now as an entity? When they come and say, I'm building my whatever hundreds room hotel, and we say, oh, great. By the way, you need to buy a new fire engine, or you need to do, you know, whatever the case may be, so that we can provide proper support for that. I'd be curious to know the answer to that, if we have any authority to right now, out of CFD to require developers to fund their impact.
So I don't know what's on the books now, but yes, you do have the ability to work and establish that outside of the CFD. The CFD does not give you the only authority to do that. And I think kind of what you're mentioning here is commonly done through developer agreements. So there are times where if a development is large developments are coming to the public agencies, they're asking for certain concessions. So the agencies in that negotiation and in that agreement, they'll say, okay, fine, we'll approve this agreement, but you got to buy, you know, a truck, or you have to help fund a fire station. So those are more one-off and like larger developments. I'm not really certain of if you would see those here, given the layout and the geography. But I could be wrong. But in any event, you certainly have the ability to establish conditions of approval to come up with some sort of funding mechanism to offset the cost of the increased staffing that you will be required to get to provide that level of service.
Yeah, but what you said, that's a one-time fee, so we could buy the fire engine, but we couldn't afford to staff it because we couldn't afford to pay the firemen on an ongoing basis to do it. My other question, right quick, is I understand that we currently have 2 CFDs in place.
And the CSD has 2.
The CSD has 2 CFDs in place.
Yeah.
And how would this interact if we were to form a valley-wide CFD?
So what we would need to do in that case is you would have to work with the CSD and ensure that the property is not being subject to both CFDs and subject to the same special tax for the same service. It's perfectly appropriate to have multiple CFDs on a property. It happens all the time from the perspective like a school district and a water district, and then the city, they could all have CFDs. They're just not paying for the same service. So that's the distinction we have to make. What we would envision here is if the CSD, and I believe they have a CFD that provides for fire services, any property that is undeveloped and there's no taxpayer in there now, we would probably want to look with and work with the CSD to see if there's an option to have them dissolve their existing CFD on that property and allow the authority to put the CFD on that property and then collect the funds directly. That would be the preferred method, and it would take a little bit of back and forth, but it's not undoable. But that's a great question, and that is something that we would need to account for as the authority decides to move forward.
Have we assessed that? Does someone have a good understanding of what the existing CFD or CFDs are in place?
I think Larry could maybe touch on that. Sorry to put you on the spot.
In 2007, I recall, a CFD was created. Something like 13 developers were involved. They agreed to impose this on themselves. To date, nothing has been generated because nothing is built. But I need to clarify here, we're talking, I've heard the word development and developments. I understood this would apply to any new construction.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
Within the CSD and the fire protection district.
within the
Yeah,
CFD.
That's
With
part of
The
the,
CFD can't go beyond the CSD and the fire protection district. Like you can't do CFD and Fonskin.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so it's only our jurisdiction.
Our two jurisdictions, yes.
Yeah, our,
part of the setup is to establish the perimeter.
So. Someone comes and builds a new house. Or it doesn't matter what it is, new development. They are going to start paying property tax. So to some degree, they are gonna be offsetting their burden. That they are putting on the system through the property tax that they pay. Actually, you could argue with Prop 13 and people who have maybe been in their houses a long time and their tax basis is really low. They may be paying disproportionately higher because they're gonna be paying current valuations compared if someone's been in their house for a decade or two, right? So they're gonna be paying taxes to that. To contribute to the overall fire code. What we're talking about doing here is on top of that, adding another financial burden on them to have them pay even more than the rest of us are paying to offset whatever that burden may be. Now, depending on what your goals are, you may be all in favor of that. If you want to discourage development, that might be a good tool in your toolkit to do that. And then I'm still just struggling with how those new fees would get imposed, and I think that is maybe my misunderstanding, is that when we originally started talking about it, it was like a one-time impact developer fee. And I understand this is different, this is,
what we looked at 2 years ago, the numbers were just bigger. And so there,
A lot
that
bigger.
might be where the confusion came from, because the number was so big, it seemed like it was a one-time impact fee. But it was actually an annual amount for any new development
Okay.
over 3,000 square feet.
so I guess what I'm trying to understand is, what are we trying to accomplish with this? Are we trying to disproportionately raise more income on new construction? Because it would be disproportionate, because they're gonna be paying the same or higher taxes just in their base tax level, like I just explained. And then on top of that, if we were to do something like this, they're gonna be paying even more. Is that our goal? And then how does that work with all the other people that are funding and maybe funding at lower levels? And how do we get everyone to pay their fair share, not just have the new construction pay, could argue, more than their fair share or more than, well, relative to what everybody else is paying? Now, because see, to me, there's a significant difference between ongoing revenue that is placed on new development versus, oh, one-time fee, you're building a big hotel, you know, we need another ladder truck or whatever the situation is. There's a specific burden based on.
The problem is the
There's
one-time
different
fee
things.
doesn't give us the firefighters or the paramedics to staff it.
Right,
And so this is looking at, the reality is, y'all tried Measure I, it didn't work.
right.
This is, as our valley grows and develops, we need to be forward-thinking and proactive if we want to maintain our fire department and maintain them to be able to take care of the development that we get. And how do you do that? As new developments come in, there is an increased cost and burden on our resources that we have.
Right.
And if they want to build a new house, there are plenty that they can buy, but
But-
there are plenty of things that people can move into. We've got plenty of empty and vacant properties if they want those.
But they're gonna be, understand, they're gonna be paying for that if you didn't do a CFD,
Not
they're gonna be
sufficiently.
paying, well, we're all not paying sufficiently for it.
I mean, the reality is
It's
we
not
want
just
to
new
be
development.
forward thinking, to think of where we're going as we develop as a community and start to think through with very, very small numbers, which is why we came up with 4 scenarios. I mean, if somebody wants to build an 1,100 square foot house, and we want to have a new ambulance staff with firefighters, it's an extra $9 each. So we were trying to come up with numbers that don't stifle development because it's important for the valley, but to start to be able to afford the service levels that we need to be able to give those people services. And my guess is people don't have an appetite to go back out for Measure I again. But where do you start to be forward thinking and go, we want you to come to our community. We want to be welcoming to you. We want to make sure that we have the firefighters and the paramedics that are able to take care of you. And it's going to cost you an extra $43 a year.
Well, the
And
reality.
guess what? You get to come to our community and be a part of our community. And yeah, there's additional slight little amount
Right,
that you've got to.
and you're gonna be paying more than everybody else that was here before you.
And guess what? I bought my house at an interest rate of 2.5, and if I sold it tomorrow, somebody would get it at a 7. They're paying more for my house.
Well,
I mean, that happens.
well, we see this all over California with no roofs. I mean, that happens every day of the week, whether you agree with no roofs or not. But I guess the question is, and there's really no way of ascertaining it, is so Randy, they built that 3,000 square foot house over in the valley someplace. We know the property tax is going to go up on it. Will that go up sufficient to cover what we're talking about here?
Just to be clear, it will, but only with the taxing agency that collects money on property taxes, which is the fire district. Only the fire district does that. Well, the CSD does not. So we kind of throw in something that's uneven again into this.
I thought the
So
fire
the-
district, I mean, I thought CSD did have.
No,
that-
well, it's a fixed amount.
County?
It's a fixed amount.
So the revenue that the county, the CSD generates is a fixed amount and it's not based on property values?
It only goes up by 4% per year, and it's not based upon property values, it's based upon what was voted in 15, 20 years ago.
There's 2 different things.
Well, then explain it, because all I've heard is that
The
CSD's
1999
income is
fire tax,
fixed. It's fixed, right?
it's allowed a
It would only
certain
increase
percentage
by-
increase every year.
Yeah, a certain amount every year based upon what was voted in, what the voters voted for.
A formula.
Okay, so then that number is essentially fixed except for the annual increase, where property taxes. Properties change hands and immediately then goes up to what the value was at that particular time. A new house is also then given that same value as it would be as it's a brand new house, start fresh with them.
But the CSD
Plus-
experience is
well-
the same thing.
The CSD
Well, I know,
has
but that money
both.
doesn't come to the fire department.
Yes,
The CSD has
Then,
both.
then I'm totally confused because
They have
I've been told the CSD's funding is fixed, except for a small amount that can be increased on an annual basis that is not linked to property values. If it was linked to property values, we'd all be happy because we'd be in the same boat as if you could explain it, because
Please,
I want to make sure that this is really clear, because right now this is not really clear and
you bet. They have both. They have property taxes which go up with property values, but they also have a fire tax. That's the one that you're referring to that can only go up by a CPI increase that is an average of the last 10 years. So that's the one that's more limited, but they also have ad valorem property taxes.
then why don't we see that increase, the same percentage of the city increases?
Sometimes we do, I'll send you some statistics on that. It's in the same range. It's
And
just
we
a
need
small
to have it
amount.
broken out to exactly what that fixed amount is and what the amount is that's
You-
tied to their property tax. And we need to see how that increases and decreases. Because again, I keep hearing, we only have this, and it only goes up by 4%. And don't ask for any more. Apparently, we're not getting the whole picture.
You bet, it's detailed out in the budget, it's broken out in all the different categories, and I'll be glad to show you the percentage increase year over year in each of the categories. For the CSD as well as the fire protection district, I can do a spreadsheet for you to show you.
Okay, there are more properties in the CSD area, and I'd like to try to understand why then funding has not kept up with the fire district. It doesn't make sense to me.
Is it potentially because properties in Big Bear Lake go higher?
That's only part of it.
Yeah, but we have a fraction of our properties.
Right.
I have a question. Now, the CSD has fire funds coming in from property tax, correct?
Correct.
All right, so if I was to build a $10 million house east of Division, what percentage, if you would know that, of that increase, because if assuming the property is worth $1 million right now, what percentage of that increase would I see, or would CSD see in its fire district?
So you'd be taxed 1% on the value of your property. And of that 1%, 7.5% would go to the CSD and pass through to the fire authority.
The entire 7.5%.
Yes.
So we can expect 7.5% of
Of the
the
1%.
1% of the entire value of all properties in the CSD. I need
Correct.
to see what that number is.
And that's part of the disparity is because on the CSD side, we get 7.5% of the 1%. In the fire protection district, we get 15% of the 1%. So that's part of the disparity. That's just how it was set back.
Percentages are different, and that's why they have that other tax is to backfill, right?
Right, to offset that.
That second tax is to backfill the lower rate.
It helped create a full-time department as well.
So then why did the revenues only go up by 4%? It
The,
should have gone up more than that. Property values have been going up all over, properties are changing homes, changing hands, that's very common in a resort community. To have constant turnover, and there are some very expensive properties in the CSD area, they're not just in Big Bear Lake. So.
agreed.
How come we didn't see that percentage go up higher?
I have a 5-year property tax forecast scenario for both sides. I'd be glad to send that to you. It has a lot of detailed information about property values and historic trends and such. I could send that your way.
Can you send it to all of us? Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you.
There's also been a misunderstanding in that last month we approved the GAN measure that says how much we can spend and no more. And the number, I believe, was around 10 million. That doesn't mean we get 10 million in taxes. It just means if we got that much, we could expand our budget each year to the tune of 10 million. What you're getting right now is what comes in and then is transferred over. Both the 1999 fire tax and the 7.5% of 1% as well.
And that 7.5% is set. I thought I had heard
It
at one
varies.
point that it, exactly,
The
that it
The
could be
money you
whatever
get
you
varies.
choose to do on an annual basis.
But the 7.5% is set by county. We,
Okay.
It's all separate.
Okay, but
No, wait a second.
what's the fire tax? Clarify that for me. Is
Uh,
that based on property value?
It is based on, it's a certain set rate that is applied to different types of property, like a vacant parcel or a home or
mobile home,
mobile home. It's a rate that was passed back when they did
1999.
1999 and with a CPI index factor built into it, which is applied every
So
year.
it's a flat amount based on the type of parcel,
It's
not a percentage of the value of.
right. It had a starting point as a flat amount and then it increases every year with this.
So it doesn't matter, you could put Taj Mahal out in the CSD area somewhere and they would still only charge $10? I'm just throwing a number out. If it's a flat fee for a house, is that what you're saying?
For the fire tax, but
For that portion,
For the fire tax, yeah.
yes, right.
and that helps contribute to the disparity.
That's
Is-
crazy.
Is the 4% that Mr. Herrick's presented, is that what it increased this year, or was it?
I'd have to go back and look. I'll get back to you on that.
But I don't know that the 4% was accurate. I thought it was 3.58 or something.
If I could,
just for the point of the discussion. The ad hoc strategic planning committee was put together to develop a plan for the future of the organization. It was recognized that we did not meet initial response force based on NFPA recommendations for particular size structures, and we have low and medium sized hazards based on residential property size and commercial sized buildings, being our hotels and motels. Determined that we wanted to see those increase in personnel for our suppression. And the committee had recommended that we come up with ideas on how to fund these positions. So that prompted these discussions. The initial CFD that was brought forward by the former chief was not a number that was going to be tolerable. It was going to stop development. It would absolutely have discouraged people from building. We came back with this idea because it is a way to increase our staffing. And we proposed some ideas that make things that we believe might be seen as more tolerable and not stop people from wanting to develop and build up here. And so that was how we got with this to these numbers with the assistance of DTA. For the board to consider as potentials. Is it what we absolutely need? No, but it's going to assist us. It will add personnel, which will benefit the community and our ability to deliver that service. So we could just maybe come back to this document and see if there's any tolerance for this or any recommendations to go back and maybe reevaluate.
Do you have another question?
Just a second, 2 years ago, when we talked about this, the fee that was proposed to us, and don't quote me on cents, but it was like $7.69 or something like that per square
70%.
foot. And this is at the very highest, it's $1.55. So we really ratcheted it down to make it more palatable. Did you have something?
Yes. We're talking new construction. If I have a 2,500 square foot and I want to add 1,000 square feet, now I trigger this, don't I?
Yes.
Would it be on the addition of 1,000 or would it trigger on the whole house?
My thought would be that you would go on the entire size of the property, because it's the entire property size that creates or adds the risk.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Chief, if I could just add to that, when you form the CFD, you can decide that. You could structure that to be on the entire property that would trigger it, or you can just say it's going to be on the additional square footage. That'd be a decision you guys can make, and we can structure the rate and method of apportionment in that manner. And while I'm interrupting, and I apologize, I just wanted to add one thing for the board's consideration here is a lot of agencies that get to their full build out and didn't take advantage of special districts such as a community facilities district or an LMD, they regret it because they can't go backwards. So when you have undeveloped land, it's kind of a use it or lose it scenario, because once someone builds on that property, you can't take them into the district in the same manner as you would. The reason for that is because under the Melrose Act, if there's less than 12 registered voters, it's a landowner election. They get 1 vote per acre they own. And a lot of times this is just one landowner. So he's going to vote yes, because we talked about before conditions of approval. Once this all gets developed, you can't do anything. I heard mention of Measure I. You would require a registered vote at a general election. You would require 2/3 of the registered voter in the entire district to approve it. That's why we can't go after existing development. It's not supportable. The people will not vote to tax themselves. It's very difficult. I won't say it's impossible, but it's very difficult to do. So what the district has here is undeveloped land that is potentially the easiest that you could apply a CFD on it. For every property that develops after this, that pocket's smaller. So just want to leave that food for thought. The other thing I wanted to mention is talking about pricing out development. Now, this statement would apply more to broader, larger developments. So I'm going to think it's going to apply here to like hotels and things like that. But an agent or a developer is always going to come, if they have a big project, they want to issue bonds through a CFD. So they're going to go to the city, they're going to go to the school district or the water district to finance improvements, and then have the property owners that buy the property pay back bonds that they reimburse themselves with. So when we talk about pricing property owners out from that larger perspective, it doesn't matter if the district puts their hand in that pot because they're going to max out whatever they can anyway. Up to the 2% is the typical threshold of the value of the property. So I just share that for food for thought for decision making. It's not as bad as I think it's kind of been made out here to be, but that's just my opinion. So thank you.
Can I get clarification on what it takes to form CFD?
I can address that. So what we would need is a property owner is going to submit a petition to the district to form the CFD. You also have the ability to put 2 board members can also initiate this procedure as well. After that, we have 90 days to go to the adopt a resolution of intention. So that's meeting 1. You adopt the resolution intention, establishes the boundaries, it sets up the rate and method of apportionment, and it sets the public hearing for the formation. No sooner than 30, no later than 60, you're going to hold a public hearing, a notice public hearing. And if there's no majority protest, which there won't be because there's going to be 1 landowner included, you establish a district and you'll hold an election following that. It's a landowner election. So immediately following the public hearing, you're going to submit, they'll have a ballot already submitted. You'll canvass the election, assuming it's a vote yes, you've now formed the district. There's just 1 meeting after that where you would do a second reading of the ordinance. And after that, that CFD is established. Any property owner can annex into that CFD following the same procedure moving forward.
So to get this started, if I'm following, it takes either 1 property owner that's willing to participate in it and support it, or it takes 2 board members. And that's it.
To start the proceedings. So at the end of the day, the board will form and establish the CFD, assuming there's no majority protest. Each property owner that comes, it's either the initial property owner or every property owner that annexes in, they have.
I need to interrupt you for a second. When you said assuming there's no majority protest, what majority protest would there be?
So
I don't
great question. So procedurally, when you're at the public hearing, the second meeting to establish the CFD, you're going to adopt a resolution of formation that establishes the CFD. Before you can adopt that, you have to allow for majority protests. So if a majority of the property owners that were to be included in your CFD write a written protest and say, I don't want to be included in the CFD, the Mello-Roos Act says you have to stop and you can't form that CFD on that same property for a year. But procedurally, what happens is we never receive a majority protest because, as we discussed before, these are conditions of approval to get their project done. So they want the CFD. So and it's 1 property owner is voting yes. So if he's already agreed to form the CFD, he's not going to protest its formation. So even though I mention it, it rarely, if ever, happens. If that makes sense.
Can I back up a step and just ask you to clarify as well, Rich? This also starts with setting the goals and policies concerning the use of CFDs, right?
Great point, Nick. Yeah. So before the district can form its first CFD, you have to establish what are called goals and policies. It's required under the Mello-Roos Act. And we can do that at the same meeting if the district doesn't have those. But yes, you have to establish documents of local goals and policies. Once that's in place, you're free to form the CFD.
That would be the first step that the board would take to essentially say, in the future going forward, when there's new development, our goal and policy is to establish a CFD. These are the details of what the goals and policies that these CFDs are intended to provide to the authority.
So there's no opportunity for all of the property owners in the affected district or districts to have a majority protest when you start this out, correct?
Yes, there is.
As long as it is a condition of approval from the land use agency that they deal with their fire impacts somehow,
No.
then they will not.
This is an important thing. I'm not sure that we're all.
Yes, there is. If the majority of the property owners in this CFD were to show up at this building here and say, we don't want this, and it's 50+1, it dies.
If I could just add, we're not going to go district wide. You will have 1 property owner at a time.
It's not everybody within the boundaries of the 2 agencies and the authority. It is when we say that the district, it's only the CFD itself. So when that first parcel comes along, it would be the owner of that 1 parcel. When they show up at the meeting, they could protest. But if that owner of that 1 parcel doesn't protest because it's a condition of approval for their project to move forward, to form the CFD, they're going to do that. They're not going to protest. They'll vote in favor of it. But it is not a majority protest of everyone that lives in this.
So we have 5,000 property owners in this valley and one person can walk in here and say, I want to do it and have a nice day. Is that what we're saying?
Only his property would be subject to the special tax. So even though any undeveloped property within the boundaries of the district would be subject to the CFD, it's just one at a time.
So we can
That's
raise
each,
only.
that's each time something is added or sub. Again, yeah, exactly. It's up to you on exactly what it applies to. If it is brand new from the ground up development, and that's the only thing that it applies to, only those people would be subject to this and would need to annex it each time.
Okay.
But to your point, Chuck, this is an important distinction, because if I'm following. It allows us to put in taxes on future development. Without people. What would be the remedy if you didn't want to do that? You just don't develop?
Yeah.
You may not develop or come up with something else. In discussion between the authority and the land use agency to otherwise offset their impacts that.
So, and I apologize for this, but I think these details are really important, the devil's in the details. So let's say you want to build an ADU. Are there restrictions? Because I know there's all kinds of free passes for ADUs where you don't have to do all kinds of things. Much to the consternation of many cities across the state, that ADUs get pretty wide berth when it comes to that. Are ADUs exempt from this? In other words, let's say this is in place. I want to build an ADU. Am I allowed to build the ADU or only if I opt in? Or is that somehow at the state level exempt from this kind of thing?
It may depend on the nature, the size and nature of the ADU, and I'll ask Rich if he knows anything familiar offhand, but. We might have to look at the ADUs that the state says land use agencies have to automatically entitle, and they get all of these special preferences as to impact fees and utility fees and those types of things. Generally, that applies to what are called junior ADUs, and then attached ADUs that are less than a certain size. But if someone wants to build a 1,500 square foot ADU, generally those are the types of ADUs that are not protected by state law and don't have the special privileges that you're talking about. And those might be developments that the authority could include in this type of tax system. So there might be some ADUs that are off limits, and I don't know offhand, but a lot of ADUs that are built actually don't qualify for the state's level of protections.
Okay, so I just want to be mindful of this and what the impacts potentially could be as we go down this road. So one is, if you were interested in increasing affordable housing in the area, and you are making it. Still not clear on what discretion we have, but let's say hypothetically that if you do any building on your property, and let's say hypothetically ADUs are not exempt and remodels aren't exempt. What you're gonna be doing is triggering this tax for anybody that wants to do any improvements to their existing property, not just new stuff, but existing stuff. So depending on the cost, the perceived cost of that, you may be discouraging people from building ADUs. You may be discouraging people from improving their property or remodeling it. And then we get into issues of, are you encouraging blight? Are you, in the old crappy cabins that we have around that haven't seen any love or care in a long time? So there's that to consider of what is the unintended consequence of that too. So to me, it's a very interesting question of, do you want to disproportionately compared to everybody else, burden any new development and potentially just new construction with the higher taxes? And we may very well decide, yes, we do, because that's our only viable way forward to the gentleman's point of sort of planting our stake in the ground so that we have a path forward and thinking about the future, and not that might be the only way to do it. But it does create increased disparity, and I assume that tax rate sticks with the property even when it sells. So then you're gonna have, properties next door to one another potentially that will have a higher tax rate than the one next door. Will be another thing. So it'll be kind of a buyer beware. If you're buying a house up here, you want to pay attention to what what tax rate you're subject.
But they're also putting a burden on the fire department.
Right, but the fact that their new assessed value is going to be taxed contributes to that burden.
Well, like she.
But just not at a
She's
specific
at
rate.
3.5%, the next guy's, gonna be at 7, that's gonna be a higher rate.
Yeah.
You're looking at 100, even at the top level, 155 a year.
Or 1,100 square foot.
Right, right. But that's on top of the base property taxes they're gonna be paying.
I understand.
Okay.
I can afford $155 a year, you can afford $155 a year. Well, if there's somebody who's gonna build a brand new house. They spend $155 more.
Okay. I want our eyes to be open when we.
If we're a resort,
So I'm gonna
if you wanna
take,
live here or build up here. So you spend some more money, it was $155.
Yeah, but why would you just buy a house?
Well, then they
I
can
mean,
go buy a
and
house.
that's one of the arguments about Mello-Roos, is be careful of districts that have Mello-Roos. Because your neighbor might be paying $1,000 a year. Or you're gonna pay $10,000 a year because you have a new house, you have a Mello-Roos on top of it, they're under Prop 13.
So we're gonna kick this down the road another 2 years. While they build more hotels.
It's the same argument that
Good
had come
idea.
before with the Mello-Roos arguments, which I've heard when we were trying to build
Yeah.
a pool. And we're looking at actually the same Mello-Roos type district to pay for a pool.
I'm not arguing for one over the other. I just wanna make sure, at least I do, and I appreciate your patience with me, that I understand the full impact of this. And I think it's helpful for all of us to understand. the
Speaking of
full-
that, again, my numbers are so tiny that we're gonna get right off the bat, that it's gonna
Right.
take years to build them up.
And
But
yet
that's the
these
thing, we
keep
haven't
bringing
done
in
anything.
income.
For years and years and years, we have not done anything.
Anything,
And we have watched development come in and we've watched the valley expand
and
and
nothing, like
create
you said.
increased burdens, and we haven't done anything. And it's incremental steps.
And then that needs to be made clear, we are not going to one of these scenarios, hiring all these people based upon
No.
year one.
We don't
This
hire,
is more like
you don't go out and buy anything until you get the money.
yeah,
I guess my question for the consultants would be, do you have any data of numbers in communities that I'm trying to find the right way to word this, don't stifle development? Like, is there a tipping point that says this dollar amount has been acceptable? Whereas if you go over a certain dollar amount, we have found that it has it harms the community because it stifles development. Is there a way that we can quantify that in looking at our numbers?
Yeah, that's maybe a difficult question. It varies widely from, as you would think, from region to region. So, we have formed CFDs up and down the state with varying tax rates in different types of communities, all having a different set of policies that they need to work around. And so, I think it is hard to answer that question. I think we have done an analysis for a different agency, I believe in Riverside County a while back, that may have looked at some of this type of information that you're asking. We can try and pull that up and see if that gives you any insight. It might be helpful here.
Because I think that's what we've been trying to find. When we looked at this 2 years ago, we said that number is too big, it will absolutely stifle development. And now I feel like we're taking stabs in the dark of, oh, we think this number will be reasonable to people, that will give us some of what we need as we grow. And we don't think we'll stifle development, but I'm taking a stab at the dark. I'm throwing, a dart at a dartboard, trying to figure out what that is. If there was some data that we could get that says if you do X amount, we find that it doesn't stifle development. And I understand that there's 1,000 different factors that we need to take a look at to go, who would this apply to? What is the unintended consequences of that? But I think we just keep kicking the can down the road, and the valley keeps developing and people are coming in And we have a fire department that can't afford to give the level of service that we need and deserve as a community, and we need to start looking and asking and tackling the hard questions. And so to the extent that there's data that we can get to do that, but I don't want to wait another 2 years to, and if we have a consensus from the board that's like, no way in hell, I'm not interested, then let's not waste our time. But we're 2+ years into the ad hoc committee meeting strategy, whatever it's called. We've been going through a list and crossing things off the list, and if this is when the board wants to cross off the list, then like, let us know and we'll move in a different direction.
And we've come a long way from over
Or-
$7 a foot.
Or is there additional data that is needed, which I'm sure there is, for us to have a conversation about this? But days are ticking and development is happening and people are coming to our community, and we can either continue to do nothing or we can make hard decisions and do something.
Can I ask a question, Kristen? Please. On scenario 4, which I understand is our preferred one because it's the highest level of service. I want to make sure I'm following. So if I start on the first page, on the 4th column, scenario 4. This total of $2.6 million is based on some combination of this stuff down here, right?
All three of those
Okay.
things.
So that's a higher level of service than we have now.
Correct.
Okay, so let's just call that the Cadillac option. And we have a higher level of service there that costs $2.6 million a year. You anticipate that based on all the stuff that's detailed down in part 4, $1.55 a square foot, so much per unit, all of that stuff, that would generate $1.4 million in revenue.
Correct.
Okay, so we're upside down there by $1.2 million, right?
So if you look at this, the second section on the first page, it describes that it's anticipated based on estimates for the amount of build out we might have, that we would generate 1.2 million in additional property taxes just because they have been built and they.
Right, which what I was talking about before.
So we would anticipate that, so we deducted that from the requirement of 2.6.
Okay.
To say that in this scenario, we're trying to rank 1.4. And so all the calculations below that are a way to get to that 1.4.
Oh, okay, I got it. So then the net need is 1.4,
Correct.
because there's additional property tax at a base level that's coming in to cover that 2.6, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so then so that's all how all the fees work out. And then where does it show us how we end up? So if we need 1.4, how do we? That the fees down in scenario 4 get us to that 1.4, basically?
Correct.
Okay. So what the fees that are outlined on the 4th panel, the 4th part, will get us the money we need to do that higher level of service, and that's basically $1.55 a square foot for residential and all those different fees for different things.
Now, remember, this is if we develop all this empty.
Right. Well, no, that's
We don't know how much we're really going to
Right.
build.
But this is at build out?
This is
or
at
this?
It's 1,769 units. And we're averaging way under 100, I would bet, for the entire valley. In fact, probably more like 50 annual.
Yeah, and I believe it addresses that, Director Harris,
So it's
in
a lot of years.
So it's not based on historical building, it's based on max build out.
bullet point number 2,
Right.
based on roughly
Right.
50 units per year times 35 years.
That.
The assumption would be a 2060 build out based on.
Oh,
what
so
we
this
have
is
seen
35 years out.
Historically.
If we build out.
It's a start.
Right,
But we need to start.
But the costs aren't gonna be anywhere near the same here, right?
No, there will be a CPI built into it.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand how close we get to some better levels of service.
So I'm gonna take a moment and see if there's any public comment on this item. Patrice?
No, okay. I would just encourage the Big Bear Lake folks to take a drive along 38 out Big Bear Boulevard. You might not be aware, but the parcel of land on the corner of Shore and Big Bear Boulevard, the remainder of 80 acres has been sold and being developed retail, which you probably have lost the ability to tax that piece of property. There's multiple large pieces of property along 38 that are zoned commercial that are up for sale right now and are probably being looked at. You missed the boat on the Hilton property, the Hilton Hampton Inn property. And then if Snow Summit does develop this hotel, there's another piece of land that you guys could be getting some money on. It is a long-term plan. I think we're looking at the very small portion of a house here, a house there. You guys are looking at, what the property available in Big Bear Lake, which is not that much, but on the east end of the valley, there's a lot of large parcels available. They may turn out to be residential developments, they may turn out to be commercial, but I would really encourage you guys to look at the amount of money, and I think you do need to put a line in the sand now. I think that just like when I bought up here, I looked at parcels that had HOAs and I didn't want that, and I looked for a parcel elsewhere. I think that the amount of money that is being requested can really impact the fire department. And if you really want to live up here, develop up here, it's gonna not be a matter of interest. The fact that two parcels next together might have different tax rates, that happens all across the country. We sit next to each other in airplanes, two different costs. We have two different interest rates, as Director Malik pointed out. So I think that this is a really great way to at least put a line in the sand and start to bring in some money for this fire department, because these buildings, the expansion of homes is going to put a larger demand on our fire department, and we need to at least look at covering those costs the best way we can, because at this time, it seems like it's the only option. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public? No? Okay, bring it back.
I'm just wondering if there are next steps, as I think there are a lot of good questions and things, but I'm just wondering, is there additional information that we all need to move this conversation forward, or is it, this is a non-starter, in which case, let's just,
Do we need a vote
well, I think we need to figure it.
to see if you want to do a CFP?
I don't think we're at a place to do a vote of,
So it's gonna be more and more time.
And then we're
Yeah, I mean, we
kicking it down the road.
we did feel that on the strategic planning, this is really like our, we've exhausted everything. And that, we do have an upcoming hotel, so we were trying to get as much information as we could to try and get this rolling.
Can I ask the consultants a question? Once this is in place, is there any opportunity for us to adjust the
We
rates?
can
or-
amend it. It's off of once a year, right? If we want.
No. Yeah,
No.
once you form the CFD with the rates defined in the rate method of apportionment, that's what you're stuck with going forward, other than the CPI escalator.
Yeah.
So.
I would just, I apologize. I would just add that the district has the authority to levy less each year if needed. So you can always put on the tax roll a smaller special tax if you felt it was needed, but you cannot exceed the max that you set here today.
And then just another note, we could set it up differently for each property owner that decides to annex in or create their own CFD separately, if that was another option.
what does that mean?
Yeah, that's.
I think there, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rich, there could be a procedure to allow for different rates for each property owner that annexes in. We could do an analysis and set the rates that way.
There is, from the perspective of annexable CFDs that are formed in a very specific manner, that the district has the ability to change the tax based on the services, but based on the limited services being provided here, is that it's going to be fire and ambulance services for everybody. I don't really see that being a benefit. That would come into play more as if from development to development, you have different number of streetlights, the number of landscaping in streets, the things that you're trying to maintain are different. But here, everything's the same. So Nahal, I don't really think that would be helpful here, but I could be wrong. Happy to discuss that further.
I would like to know what options there are, because Perry, you brought up a really good point, we may be shooting in the dark. I have a feeling we're ultimately going to be shooting in the dark to some degree. What are our options, though, to change this? Could we dissolve it and start a new one in the same way?
There are procedures. You can dissolve a CFD at any time. And you can form a new one at any time. What you would not be able to do is go back to an existing development. So let's just say, for argument, we form a CFD, we put some properties in there, and now you're saying, let's dissolve and form a new one. To go back to those property owners, you would have a registered owner vote. If there's more than 12 registered owners in the boundary you're trying to form for that CFD, it puts you back in the same scenario you're at now, why you can't apply it everywhere on all existing, because you won't get the vote is the uphill battle you'd be fighting.
If you dissolve the CFD, do you lose that related tax money, or does that stay in place?
No, that's gone. So when you dissolve the CFD, you lose the ability to impose a special tax.
Like on a set of property over a set of time, this is a one-shot thing.
Could I just clarify, Rich, though, so let's say if a few commercial properties developed and that were subject to this CFD that was formed, but then otherwise the authority found that it was, let's say, stifling development on residential, the authority could decide to create a new, different one. And the existing properties that were subject to the other CSD would just continue on, and the authority could form a new, different one with a different amount. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It is not uncommon for like cities and counties to have multiple CFDs throughout the city. It is very common. You could have 30 plus. I'm thinking of a city in Riverside County that has that.
It's just additional administrative and procedural cost to set up a different one each time.
And this is Andrea at DTA. If I could just step in, do I need to ask to unmute, or can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Just wanted to clarify, I guess, there's a bunch of different conversations going on here, but if you've had a few annexations, find that your costs are significantly different for the same service because they've changed and they're not keeping pace. Rich, I think not changing what we're paying for, but times have changed. You could keep those initial CF people that joined the first CFD, and you don't need to dissolve them. They would probably stay in that CFD, but you could then create a new one and make all future development join that new CFD. And I think a lot of this stuff are details that we would get into sort of if the direction of the board is to move forward with this. A lot of the questions that have been asked tonight are really good questions, and that would come about as part of the analysis and the formation process. What are the rules for ADUs? What are the, how a lot of things are handled. So just sorry, wanted to jump in on that.
So if we decide on this tonight, it's still going to take several months for it to get going.
Yes.
So we need to move on something. My
Essentially,
opinion.
one of the ways that the board could handle it is, I think one of the things staff is looking for is just direction. Do you want this process to continue? Do you want direction to continue to move toward a CFD? And then how do you want to make some of these important policy decisions about which scenario? Do you want to decide a scenario here tonight? Do you want to send that back to the ad hoc committee to come back with a recommendation for the next meeting on which scenario the ad hoc committee recommends to the board? That's up for discussion, and then staff can go from there and pulling together documents with DTA and with our office.
So we just need to decide tonight if we're gonna move forward with the CFD.
That's one of the key questions for the
So we
board.
don't have to necessarily decide on a scenario tonight.
No, it's not set in stone there. We still have to draw the goals and policies, and the consultant would have to refine the analysis. So no, you're not set in stone based on what you decide tonight.
I think
We have
it's.
flexibility with the map too, correct?
Well, when you say the map, what do you mean?
The map you're talking about for the district that's being formed.
The map.
There would be no map to start with. It would basically be any property, any undeveloped property that develops within.
You have to have a perimeter, it's not.
I can address that question. So when we form the CFD, what we could set up is a annexable boundary line. It's very common. Agencies do this when they know they're going to have properties annexed in. So we just set the boundary line for the annexable area to be the entire district boundary, but only applicable to undeveloped property. So I don't want to confuse the board and make it seem like we're going to go after developed property. It's just the boundary. Anything included that's undeveloped is subject to the CFD and can annex in at that time.
That's part of the decision process is my question.
But I'm missing something because it could potentially apply to development on existing properties, not just undeveloped property, right?
It's
No.
whatever.
No. It won't apply to any existing development. What we would do is when you form the CFD, you have to create a CFD boundary map. And so it's just common to where an agency that knows they're going to annex in, they just make the specific parcel that's included. So let's just say we have one property out of 5,000. He's the first zone. I'm just going to use this like a tax zone. And then there's an annexable boundary that just mirrors the district's boundary that would apply to any undeveloped property.
So if I have a house that's 2,000 square feet and I want to add on an additional 1,001 to get over that 3,000, am I in the district or am I not in the district?
That is a policy decision the board can make. You can say, we're not going to apply it to any existing development and it won't matter to, increasing capacity, or you could say we'll apply the special tax based on the amount of square footage that's increased. So that's a policy you have the ability to craft to tailor to what you feel is correct for your constituents.
So it's a type of issue the board could decide tonight and provide direction on, or you could wait until there's a more fleshed out version of this in front of you.
That
to
would be
say,
what we're
keep this
discussing,
in,
the
take
goals
this
and
out.
policies.
But it's not accurate to say at this point that it's only on undeveloped property, because we could decide
Right.
to make it on improvements on developed property.
Correct, that
Okay,
needs
I
some
just
sort
wanna
of
be
land
clear,
condition.
because we're hearing a lot of different things and I'm trying to make sense.
I just want to, yes, but I want to be clear, it's not this developed property that sits in the same state as.
Chief, can I ask you a question? And this is to help me decide which one of these four scenarios I would be inclined to go with if I went with the CFP. We are we certified by some national or state organization as to being a certified fire department?
A certified fire department, we're recognized based on the qualification and certification levels that our employees have, most of them being at the state level.
My question, I guess, then is more, you indicated that we do not meet national standards at this point.
Recommendations.
Recommendations. What kind of impact does that have on any certification or any approvals that this fire department may have of saying, we're great and wonderful?
There's not a lot involved in necessarily what we send to the incidents. If you want to talk about like maybe ISO standards, that'd be more looking at, say, response times. What we send to the fires ourselves is based on a comfort level, the ability to fund positions. And we tried to meet the recommendations of NFPA. And that, again, that was something that, was identified in the strategic planning process was, here's what we send to fires now. Here's the recommendations of NFPA. So here are the goals that we have for the strategic planning process.
Do you have any experience or knowledge, and maybe BKK would know this, on what exposure, if any, this authority has because we don't meet the recommendations and a fire gets out of control? Have you seen any indicator that there's some liability exposure to that?
Without looking at it in depth, generally public agencies have immunities, statutory immunities that protect you from, you're trying to provide a service, but you're not guaranteeing a service to the public. And so generally, I'm not aware of any sort of generalized liability that agencies have for not providing some sort of level of service. I mean, I could look into it further, but that's my general response.
Unless it gets some pushback, I'd appreciate that because, if we're looking at a recommended standard, we're not even coming close to that recommended standard, then.
It generally wouldn't be based, if there was a scenario, it wouldn't be based on generalized standards or a generalized level of service. It's types of port liability situations would arise and what happened in that specific situation and whether there was a level of negligence or gross negligence depending on the particular action, but it wouldn't be based on not providing service.
I believe, Chuck, though, our ISO rating can impact insurance rates. Like for homeowners.
Yeah, I'm just trying to decide, like, which one of these scenarios I think we need to.
But you don't have
Go
to
to.
say
But we
that.
don't have to decide on it tonight.
I know that, I'm just, over the next month, I'm gonna be thinking about this. And trying to figure out where I wanna go, and that's why I just wanted to ask that question.
So can't we just decide tonight if we're gonna do the CFD?
I don't even know if we need to go that far. Are we interested in continuing the conversation expeditiously to look into options for a CFD? So we don't have to, you don't have to say, yes, you would vote in favor of it tonight, or it's, are you open to, do you want us at the strategic planning committee to go back and come up with additional information and the different additional scenarios to be able to present again, or is this just a dead deal? So I didn't mean to cut you off. It's just sort of, I don't want them to think that they have to decide tonight whether they are all in on a CFD or not.
I gotcha. But we can decide on the CFD tonight, but not the scenario. And that's where you can have that more conversation.
Yeah. That motion.
You know, I've already said it a couple times, just please be aware that, I mean, we really did ratchet it down. From the over $7.
Well, it's still seven.
But I appreciate that there's lots of questions as to, would it apply to an ADU? Would it apply to additional development? I think we need to get some additional information from the consultants and some additional thoughts and see if there's a way to quantify what that tipping point is that helps us increase revenue for services we need versus killing development.
But we're just taking up more time
Yes.
in that.
We were trying to
We're
not kick the
trying to
can down
not-
the road.
Yeah. Kick this can down the road any farther.
What if we were to have staff go forward and work with the consultant to at least lay the groundwork on what it takes to get this going? So that if next month we're sitting here, they say, this is what we've done, we've accomplished all this, we can say, hey, go forth and do your thing. Rather than sit here and go around and around.
I think that's what Perry's trying to say. It's like either the strategic planning committee is done. Or, because we've literally ran out of options.
I would look for a consensus to have the staff start working with these consultants to see what it would take to get this going.
Okay,
Rather than keep talking about this for much to come.
okay, then let's get consensus. Randy doesn't look like he wants me to
Well,
talk first.
I wanna make sure I understand. I mean, based on your description, Chuck, I think they've already laid some groundwork and stuff. I think, would it be more helpful to tell them to start preparing one with options for us to consider? Like basically come and say, okay, if you wanna go ahead, here's the thing. Yeah, you can tweak these rates and stuff if you want, but here's how it would work. You say yes to this or a modified version of this and we're off to the races. Is that,
Yes, that'll work.
okay,
So that's what we're getting consensus on.
Yes,
So, all
does
right,
that work?
yeah, that'll work.
Okay,
okay, so. Randy,
sure.
John,
Hell, yeah.
hell, not just a yeah, but can I get a hell yeah? Okay. Chuck,
Yeah.
Larry,
Move on.
Let's get it done.
Rick,
Well, no, and here's the reason why. We're talking about kicking the can down the road. The dollars are so small. Waiting a month or two is going to be irrelevant. I mean, it's fractional the first year. It takes 35 years to get to the point where we're actually be making money. And I have more questions than answers tonight on several different levels, and I'm gonna sit down with Christian, we're gonna go over it. Because there are a lot of things that popped up, so, you know, do I wanna get more information? Yes. Do I wanna say this is a good idea at this point? No. At this point, this is not a good idea until we get more information, until more questions, so I can sit down and get more things defined.
Okay, Joe K,
Yep.
Perry,
Let's do the work.
Bob,
Yeah.
and Kendi, yes. Okay. So we have consensus that
I
we,
guess we're meeting again.
I guess we're meeting again. And we'll work on a date for that, so we can
Soon.
provide more information next month.
My hope is, Rick, that between your conversation with Kristen and then when we have something material in front of us, that's not just words flying around, that you look at me and get more confident.
What's that?
You guys worked
It's-
hard on this. I was.
it's possible. I'm saying it is possible, it's just I've gone through Belarus fights previously, and that's what we're asking for.
Just for clarification, for direction of staff for this, is the information that you'd like us to collect to include what limitations are there, exceptions for ADUs? Whether or not we'd be considered,
Why don't we get together as the strategic planning? I think we all have different pieces that we've taken from tonight, and I think before we go to the consultants, it would be helpful for us to.
Download.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so we'll get a meeting.
To the committee, can I make a couple of requests that I heard, at least, that I
Yep.
think will be helpful to me and maybe others? I think it's real helpful. I know we've gotten this over the years in different ways and stuff, but really helpful just to get a really clear snapshot of this is how taxes are collected now. You know, in this area, this is how it works, and in this area, this is how it works, so that it's super clear, and we should probably take that to our foreheads. That around for a long time back. And then I'd also like to understand what the CFDs are in place now. And then if we do a new one, because you've mentioned that there's at least one in place. If we do a new one, how does that impact it? I'd like to understand how that works. And then the other part is I'm still not clear on what mechanisms we may have now to ask new development to pay more money, because maybe I misunderstood, but it sounds like we may have other
I
options.
misunderstand, it wasn't a clear answer.
Okay, so I'd like to get a clear answer. I mean, is it a case right now where we don't have to do the Melrose and we can just say, okay, folks, if you want to develop that project, here's what it's gonna take it or leave it. I don't know if that's the thing or not.
Impact, yes.
Well, but I'd like to understand.
I think that's a good piece to add to it.
And then as you might work through it, I think, there, hopefully we've got some clarity, but just. New development, and what does that mean, and how does that relate to redevelopment, improvements, ADUs, all of that are gonna be big questions I have.
Okay.
It'll meet soon.
What's that?
Hopefully it'll be soon.
Yeah, no, we'll get on that. We need to get on that meeting. ASAP.
So the
we'll-
can did not get kicked,
Didn't get kicked.
the can is still right before us.
We're playing pass.
Rolling down
right
the
now.
road.
We're playing pass.
And Rick, since we're on the finance committee together also, and I know you have a lot of questions about this, and since I'm on the other committee, I'd like to, maybe when we talk to Kristen, we can. And I don't mean on the finance committee, David, that one of, like, I'd like to be present so I can hear your input. Okay, all right. So moving on to committee reports, I feel like we've already kind of really,
Pretty much gone over.
Yeah. kicked that one to death. So let's move to director's closing comments.
May I?
Yes.
I'd like for us to talk about at some point on making sure the administrative offices are open here on Fridays. I mean, if that means 410s for the staff, then it doesn't cost us any more money, but we are a service organization. And I think we need to provide that service to the public that pays for our salaries. So I think that's important. And at some point, maybe
when we discuss the finances, I'd like for us to have a discussion, probably in closed session, on personnel issues.
All right. Anybody else? No?
Well, I just wanna say, I don't always agree with Patrice, but, in this case, I think she's right, we need to just get going. We sit here, we're just spinning our wheels all the time, let's just freaking get going and we'll see what comes up. If we make some mistakes along the way, at least we've already started. And I think that's the biggest thing, so that's all I wanna say.
Amen. Anybody else?
I have
Okay.
one.
Okay, Larry.
In the last check roster, there's a $3,000 check to the city. My understanding is that's their fee for having held 2 fire protection district meetings at Hoford Hall. And by my count, there were at least 4 others, so I'm wondering if we're going to be hit with $6,000 more dollars. I don't recall that ever coming up for discussion here to spend that money. And tonight and last meeting, we have spent more money in terms of videos, storage. Kristen's numbers will now have to change because she understood that we were going to get 6.28 million from the county, which will now have to change because we've got to hold some money back as the only source of paying for attorney's fees having to do with potential litigation for the fire department. So that will screw up your numbers. You have mentioned that you want us to be more aware of the JPA agreement. And over time, we changed from a 50-50 that was 186.5 for the 2 agencies. Then we went into having budgets, 1 for the CSD, 1 for the city, and 1 for the authority. And we finally reduced that, and those were 1-page budgets, which were really slim on details. Then we went to consolidating it into a budget for the authority. And when Kristen came on, she parsed out the different cost points. Suppression, ground ambulance, air ambulance, mutual aid, etc. So we've been getting a lot more detail. And the facts are there. But we were supposed to have discussed issues, if you want to talk about personnel. There were some charges that Chardell and Kristen, I don't mean to use the names so much as those positions, they were not hired properly. The agreement called for initially city employees. Well, it also allowed for changing to have a CSD employee or an employee of the authority, which was brought to the board. It was authorized for the board. And the job descriptions were authorized by the board, which allowed the chief to hire to those positions. At no time am I aware of any collusion, which was brought up in the newspaper. I can only speak for myself. I have not been involved in any collusion in terms of our budget. I may not like the numbers that Willis and Krista brought up, but I believe those numbers, and we'll see for the $65,000 city gate contract if it will bring up numbers that support what was presented, or if they show some need to correct. It is what it is. And we have been bringing all the money that we get here. It's not that we're squirreling away any extra money. It's what we get from the county and it comes over. That's all we can do. And it's important that the public remember that when Mr. Ibarra or even Patrice gets up and says, remember that our obligation is to serve the community. The reality is we have finite money coming in. And until we can find some new source of money, that's what we're limited to. That's all.
Okay. All right, no other comments? Then we will be moving into closed session. Conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation. And is there any members of the public that want to speak on that? Mr. Gilliamson.
You know, I'm glad to see that that you're getting some cooperation about things. But this anticipated litigation still bothers me. That you even have to get to that point and have other people get new attorneys because everybody has BBK. Which seems a little crazy to me. Where when just a month ago, some of the arguments I saw was where to meet. People from one end of the valley didn't want to go to the other end of the valley, and it looked like it was a major situation over things that at the time, it seems like it's got to be a lot easier solution than some of the other things you're facing. But it was, it seemed much more than that about the recordings, the occupancy. You know, what are we gonna do? And so it seems like that came together pretty good and pretty quick. I'm proud of you guys. Keep up the good work. I just can't understand how some things that may seem minor to one person and another, it makes a big difference going across town in the snow and things. And I believe having a neutral ground is important for both groups. You know, I think the city of Big Bear Lake is overpowering. And I just don't agree, you know, that should have been held over there. You know, now I guess there's a monitor out in the, out here. I don't know if you have to pull the fire truck out or what. But it seems like you were able to come together and figure out things that didn't seem that complicated to me. And that both sides wanted something and it wasn't like coming together. So now it's come together, at least on minor issues, in my mind anyway. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? No. Okay, we will be adjourning and going into closed session at 7:20.